Okay, so I've got the lights here that I've made, and so the flat lights and then the angled spotlights there. And now I want to put some recessed lighting into this bar unit, and also at the same time refine that unit. And it'll be a good chance to go over some of the modelling options you've got. So I've just made that as an in-place family, and I'm going to go into a 3D view, so not a camera view but just a regular 3D view or axonometric. And so you can see there it's viewing the building from the outside. Oh, and I've got a few joists there I need to tidy up, but I'll do that later. And so I want to make a view now that I can use to work on the interior. And so if you don't remember that, a good way is to use a section box. And so I'll start by just duplicating that 3D in brackets view, and then I'll rename my copy. I'm just going to call it SB1, section box 1. And then in view properties, I'm just going to scroll down to find that section box option and tick. And so that gives us the box, which I can then use to cut away and see the interior. Okay, so get that arrow. Okay, so of course, just like anything else, you can hide section boxes by just, yep. Yeah. Look, in the past, that's how you had to do it, but now you've got special tools for that. So I'll do a demo on them later, but just to show you quickly, when you select something now in one of these views, you'll get this button up here, Displace Elements, and that basically is a special tool for making exploded axos. Yeah, yeah, it's great. It's a really good option. Okay, so there's the unit I want to work on. And now, because this is an axonometric view, not a camera view, I get the option to edit in place, and I can do most of my work in this view. So I'm going to edit in place there. Okay, so I want to make a counter that has a bit of a profile on it, and I can't do that from the ground. I need to draw something that could only be drawn in elevation. And well, I was going to start by showing you a surface or a profile drawn in a plane side on. I'll actually need to make the countertop with a sweep. No, but I will still show you drawing from a plane on the side, just to ease you into it. Not necessarily, it's just extruding a profile along a path. So a gutter is a good example, but there are lots of examples, and I'll do a couple. But I'll do an extrusion first, just again to get you thinking about how to work in different planes. So beginning with the extrusion tool, maybe what I'll do is a kick rail. So you know how in bars they have those cylinders of metal that usually sit on the ground and act almost like a kickboard. So that needs to be drawn with just a circle as a profile, but it needs to be drawn in elevation, not on the ground. Yeah. So all you need to do is change the plane that you're drawing with or drawing in, and you've got the set option for that. And you'll find a lot of the other modelling tools like sweeps and revolves rely on you using different paths. With extrusions, you usually often at first will just come up from the ground, but of course, just like I'm doing now, you can always use set with an extrusion as well and choose a different plane. So here you can see I've got a list of all these different planes, and I've used one already, profile plane. So I can choose any of those from a list, or just go to pick a plane, click OK, and then choose any surface.
So this sounds like a dumb question, but how do you know what plane?
Well, I want to draw
A cylinder.
something that'll extrude sideways.
Yeah.
So I'll just show you this thing in plan. Okay, so you can see that's my object in plan, and actually it's a good thing I looked at it because that line there isn't at a right angle to the front. So I'm looking for a plane that's perpendicular to that line there, because I want my cylinder to go along and be parallel to the front of this unit. So what I'll do now is I'll go and draw a reference plane, just starting over here somewhere. I'm going to take it over to the left. I'm going to use a shortcut. SP is snap to perpendicular. Okay, so that'll mean that the reference plane is exactly at a right angle to my unit. Let's press escape so you can see it. But that edge wouldn't have been, so I would have had to rotate it, which you can do, but this is better. So there now I can move that plane to the corner. Right, so my cylinders, or my circle, the profile I'm using to make this cylinder, is going to sit on that surface and then be extruded down. Yeah, so it's just thinking in 3D, and it's almost like picking your drawing board up and putting it at different angles, so that you can project things in different directions. So now I'm going to go to extrusion again, and well, I'll show you. If I go to set, I can't choose that plane. So what you need to do, if you want to, instead of picking a surface like this that I can see, if I want to choose something like a reference plane, I need to give it a name. So I'm just going to select it there, and now over in properties, you can see there's a name field, and I'm going to call this bar. I should know what these things are called, but let's say kick. Yeah, they put rests up it. They're barriers, but yeah, I suppose they are footrests. Yeah, I mean normally they'll have the footrest on the stool, but yeah, but I suppose it would be like a footrest. Yeah, yeah, they're more just to keep people away, their feet away from the bar, and they'd have rubbish and stuff go in. Yeah, I suppose it is. Yeah, and yeah, so we can say it's footrest, and okay, so then back into that 3D view. Now if I go to extrusion and set, and then in the list I can choose the name I've given, bar footrest. Okay, and then if you want to see the plane, you can use the show button and actually see it. And orbiting there will give you a good idea exactly where it is. So it doesn't matter how big it is, it's really just a matter of where it's located in plan and what angle it's at. Okay, so then I'm going to go and draw just a circle in space. Click to finish, and that's going to extrude it. Oh, it's got the property over here, so the depth is on 1200. We can make that. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I can just stretch that, and it's pretty good at snapping to things in 3D. So there, it'll project to the edge of the bar, even though that's at a different angle. And yeah, so you can always just either use these arrows or go back to edit extrusion, select the circle, give a different radius. So that's extruding from the side. But then if it's a traditional one, it'd have one of those round end pieces that hold it. And so I can use a revolve to make that. Okay, and so fortunately I've also got the plane set up already. I'm going to use the same plane to draw my revolve. And the reason revolves can seem tricky at first is because they don't really work all that well when you're extruding from the ground. And I'll just show you what I mean. So if I go and do a revolve, I'll use set to set the plane back to the level I'm on. I'm on level 1 FFL. So I'm going to draw something on the ground here, sort of similar to what I'm going to make anyway. That'll do. And I'm going to make an axis line. So the axis is the thing that revolves around. So I'll finish that. So you can see it's revolved it, but it's revolved it parallel to the ground, which is only useful for a limited number of objects. Normally when you revolve things, you want them to be like a spindle revolving around a vertical axis. And so that's why you need to set up a plane to do that most of the time. So I'll go back to revolve, and again I'll use set, and I'm going to choose the bar footrest again, and this time I'll take a bit more time to draw my objects. So I'm going to draw just a line for the middle. So I'm just trying to get the middle of this. There we are. Oh, now by the way, my lines are really heavy, so you can either go to thin lines, or good trick there, if you want to keep some line weight but make it lighter, you can reduce the scale. And so then I'm going to draw an arc that comes down and is basically going to be parallel with my curve. Now I've made that one a bit big, so I'll just draw that again, and I'll use pick lines just to show you a trick there. If you use pick lines, you can pick an existing curve. Yeah, so I could have offset it as I make it, or after you've made it you can easily just change that. And 45 maybe. Just joining these together. And then I want this to go down to the ground. So another good trick there when you use pick lines is to pick edges, and that's going to project onto the plane you're drawing on. So notice how that line there is at an angle to this cabinet. Because if you remember, the plane I'm working on is, that's right, it's at an angle to the, exactly, perpendicular to the front, which means it's at an angle to that side. So it's projected from that edge there onto the plane that I'm drawing on. So that means, in other words, this line is sitting exactly on the ground. And so then I'll just draw some more lines coming down from here, and I won't do all of the detail in there. I'll just trim this across, and maybe I'll put in a few extra lines just to get a little bit of detail though. So just coming across and then down and then across, down, something like that. Okay, so just trimming those together. It has to be a closed shape, so it's just like what you need for an extrusion. You're making a closed profile, and maybe this can come out a little bit more, be a bit flatter. And that's now going to be revolved 360. Yeah, that's right. And so now I need to draw an axis line. So first it's on boundary line, and then you change to draw an axis, and the axis just needs to be anywhere in line with that edge. So I'll just draw it above so it's easy to see it. And yeah. So it's going to revolve this shape around that axis when I click tick. There it is. So just think about working on a lathe. Have you ever seen lathes? You know, for timber working, they put a cylinder of timber, a dowel or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the word for that the other day.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, it's funny, these places are gone. When I used to do furniture making, there was a wood turning shop next door to us. There were a whole series of different related sort of factories near each other, and there would have been 100 guys in there, or at least 50 at any one time, all on different lathes, just turning stuff all day. And yeah, I think a lot of it's done by machines, a lot of it's imported, but you know, you can make a lot of things that way. So most legs for tables used to be made that way, and if you think about it, a lot of other products can be made that way too. So you could, yes. Yeah, so yeah, that's fine. If you're going to make it in a few different instances, well, I'll show you. So this is in model in place, and that's often good in a situation like this where it needs to be at a certain angle. But yeah, like you're saying, it in this instance could be a repeated element. So now if I want to get that into a separate file, what you do is copy to clipboard. I'm going to finish the model just so I can save the file. And yeah, exactly, open a new file. So I was going to make a new family and make it metric generic model. Why can't I see it? There it is. Yeah, I'm not going to bother making it in a category. And then under modify, go to paste, click to place it, and it's going to tell me none of the objects visible in this view. So I'm going to right click and do zoom to fit, and it's still not there. So let's try the elevation. Right click, zoom to fit, and it's because I was working up at a height. Yeah, so easy to move that down, and get it onto the origin there. So it's really important that it is centered on that origin. Okay, so again in my 3D view, it's looking into a blank spot, but if I zoom to fit, there it is. Okay, so, and again if I select that now and go edit evolve, there's my original shape and I can change those. Oh, of course, yep, so, yep. And so what I'd probably do here is maybe assign a basic material. So it even might be, you know, something tacky like brass, but can just assign that, and they will have brass in here. And then I can give it a parameter. So hopefully you're getting used to that, so you just click on this button here, and it takes a couple of clicks, and so we'll call it footrest bracket material. Don't know why my colour isn't coming up there. Let's have a look. Oh, it's, yeah, because it's not in the material. There it is. Done. So again, got to save this file as something else, and maybe I'll save it so you can get to it. You probably don't need it, but just in case you do, let's put in generic model. That'll do. Okay, so then I'll put that back in, and it's a good point actually, because there would be a few of these. I don't think I'm even going to go with this sort of design in the end, but it's good to use as an example. And so now I can copy it, and it's much easier to manage if I decide to make any changes. Of course, they'll all change. Things like this, you don't need to be too fussy about the exact location, as long as it looks right to your eyes, because if you can't tell with your eyes looking at the project every day, then no one else is going to be able to. And so you can go back to edit and place here. Now I can delete that. So this could even be smaller, I think. That's a bit. Split the difference. A nice little benefit of doing that as well is that if I go now to this cylinder, and that cylinder really wouldn't be worth making into a separate family because it'll be different on every unit. So that's something that you could just use model in place for. And so that now will give me the option though of choosing that brass material because it's coming to the project from the family that I've just loaded. That's a good process to follow. If you know that you're going to need a material that if you're going to need a certain material on a family that you're making, go through the extra steps of making it in the family file and set it all up before you save that file and then load it into your project. And it saves double handling, because if you wait until you've loaded it into the project, then you've got to go back to set it up in the other files afterwards. So it's good just to remember that. So that's good. So we've looked at modelling extrusions using a plane that's not the ground plane. So it's really just using that set option, and sometimes you'll need to make a reference plane to choose, or you can choose a surface. And then we've looked at using the revolve tool, and so then you've got the sweep tool, which is really useful for things like bars and countertops as well. So I'm actually going to go for a more modern looking bar here, and so that's why I'm probably going to get rid of this footrest in the end, but just wanted to show you an example. So I'll go back into plan so that I can draw my shape, and I do want this shape because I want it to follow those angles, but that's okay. So I'm going to select this, edit in place, and I'm going to make the shape I want for my countertop. And to begin with, I'll just use an extrusion, and I'm going to pick the edges that I have there, but then I want to round the corners, and that's really also why I need to use a sweep. You'll see in a minute. So I'm going to start with the fillet arc tool. So make sure you remember that one. If you want to round corners, you can just choose any two corners or two lines and then put a radius between them. And want it a bit less than 100. So maybe definitely want to go for a round number here. I think 80 actually will be good. Okay, so I've got the basic shape I want in plan. Click to finish, and now if you have a look in 3D, you can see it's coming up from the ground. Then I can stretch the base up. So, now, actually don't need that that part of my original extrusion anymore, so I'm just going to go and get rid of that side of it. Right, so I want this to be a bar, and bar tops an interesting thing. If you ever read about hospitality or bar design and the things you need to think about when you're setting your countertop or your counter height, it's pretty interesting. Some people have some really different ideas about what the height should be. So anything from 1 metre to 1200 is normal. So it's normally higher than 900, which is standard bench height. So again, they can be up to 1200, but I worked with a guy who'd done a lot of bars around Sydney, and he was adamant that he'd been measuring them and testing them for years and come up, now I've forgotten the number, I think it was 1080 he thought was perfect. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And he thought people just tended to congregate around it and, like, you know, just had a better time standing up against it. But anyhow, so I'm going to do 1100. And so then we've got the bottom, and I'll make that 800. And so that's the size I want it to be in the end. But remember, I want this to be rounded, and I want it rounded all the way. So I want it rounded this way, as well as rounded in plan. And so for that, I'm going to need to put a sweep around this. And so you can do a sweep the same radius as the curve I've got there, so that would be 80mm radius. But then if you think about it, we're going to hit a corner where it turns around here. It's going to be a perfect corner, so you've got to be careful there. And sometimes Revit seems to struggle, but I'll show you what will happen. So, okay, so if I make that 80mm less, so 1100, so it's going to be 1020, and I'm going to bring it up 80mm at the bottom as well, so that'll be 880. And I'm going to add that back in using my sweep. So now I'll go to sweep, and so sweeps are a bit like revolves. You've got to make a profile and then another thing to tell it where to go, but you don't make just a path or just an axis. You've got to make a full path. And so it's usually easiest to draw the path first. So here we go, sketch path. Then I could draw it here, but it might be easier to do it in plan, just so you can see a bit more clearly what I'm doing. So I'm going to go back to the plan view there, and then again go to sketch path. So I just cancelled it, and by starting again, what it'll do is detect the plane of the view that I've got open. So I don't have to set the plane again. Here you can see the work plane is level 1 FFL. So that's a bit of a trick. Whenever you're making these solids, when you first start that tool, it'll detect the plane from the one that's set in your view. So if I'd done it in that 3D view, it would have been the last plane I'd used, which was that vertical plane, which I would have had to change. So okay, so now I can just use pick lines and pick the outer edge of that unit. So I've just used tab to save me clicking on each segment. And so notice there we've got this red line. That's the profile plane. So I'm going to click tick to finish. And then I'm going to go back to the 3D view so you can see it. Okay, so it's sitting on the ground. Yeah, and look, that will still work, because that is where the path is still going in the right direction, and it would work even though it's on the ground. But it's maybe a bit easier to see what it will do if you put it to the right height. So you can change it after you've drawn it. Right, so I can still go to set, and then sorry, not in there. So I've got to go and select the path, and then click on sketch path again, and now go to set. Right, and so what that'll do is let me change the plane of my path from this floor level of level 1. I'm going to use pick a plane instead of choosing it from the list, and I'm going to choose the countertop.
And would you have to select sketch path again because you tell me whether you change that and then you go set?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So notice before it remembered the path, the plane I'd chosen when I was making the last extrusion, when I've gone out of it. So if I tick now, if I went to set now, it would still have that. Oh no, so I picked up my new one, but it basically remembers the last one you've done. Okay, so now I'm going to do my profile. So if I go to select profile, you can choose a profile from a list. These are all the ones that are loaded for all the other things in the file, and they can be really useful, but I want to draw a profile, so I'm going to click on edit profile, and now I'm going to draw a line from here across, show you a guess, 80mm, then up 80, and now with the arc tool go back to the first point and then snap to get the tangent in line with those other lines. Alright, so then now this is where it gets interesting. If I finish that, that finishes the profile, but the path and the profile are still separate. Now if I click tick again, here we are. This is the issue I was mentioning. Okay, so this often will happen. If you have a radius here equal to the radius of the path, equal to or greater than the radius of the path, it will consider that the shape is self-intersecting. So in other words, when it goes around the corner, it's going to go over itself. So what I need to do there is make this slightly smaller. No, it can even be a fraction of a millimetre. But I'm going to make it a millimetre, just so you can see. And a good technique there as well is to get rid of this curve and draw it again. So now, let's get it to measure to there. So you can see it's 80. So I'll make it 79. And then this one as well, 79. And draw in a new arc. Okay, so now, tick to finish, there we are. Okay, so, and if you're not sure what I was talking about with the self-intersecting curve, if I go to thin lines there, you'll see there is a very small radius there. But before, it would have been a corner, which it just won't let you do. But no one would know, 1 millimetre. You'll get away with it. So, okay, so that's got a rounded edge. Now, it could look even better with a smaller radius. So, you go back and select that, edit sweep, and then select profile, edit profile, and try reducing that even further. So maybe 50. So, okay, so that's my sweep done, and I could do the same on the bottom. Now, you can try mirroring in 3D, but I found if you want to edit it later, that can cause some problems. So, another good technique there is to copy and paste in the same place. So I've got a duplicate of that object on top of the original, and now I can just go back to edit sweep, and then select profile, edit profile, and mirror the profile instead of mirroring the whole thing. So if I go to mirror, draw axis now, with any luck I can pick up a midpoint of this solid, but actually that might be difficult, so I'm just going to draw a line roughly where it should be. So my line there just needs to be horizontal, so I get it mirrored down to the bottom. I should have turned copy off, but I'll just delete that instead. And now this can be moved down from the corner there. And again, maybe thin lines would be a better option here. And it's not being my friend, I'm just going to move it away and then move it back just to give me some more room, and you can see there that's snapping fairly easily to the base. Okay, so tick to finish and finish again, and I've got the bottom done. Yeah, exactly. So now I put another one inside here. So yeah, it's a bit of a process, and this is one thing I've got to say, AutoCAD has solid modelling tools, a bit like Revit. You can do extrusions and things like that, but you've had this option since the beginning to fillet a solid in AutoCAD that you just don't have in Revit. And that would let me do this in a few clicks. I could just round off all the corners with the fillet tool. Well, in Revit, see, they want you to, I think it's deliberate, they want you to model it the way you build it. And if you were going to build something like this, you would have to do even more than this, but at least you have to think about all of these different pieces, because the cabinet maker or the person building it would have to make all these little radiuses and things. So it gets you thinking about the construction. And so a good trick here to get that insert is to copy that original extrusion and then paste it in the same place. And now I can go and edit it. Well, so I can start by, so I'll just go and edit it actually. And then I'll go into Plan and use the Align tool. Pick the inside of my sweep and then pick the outer edge there. And you can just go around and choose each edge like that. And it will do connected objects, so you don't need to do every single edge. Sometimes you've got to check that it gets the curves right. There we are. So that's the insert, and once I finish it, back into 3D view, then you can just use the arrow there to stretch the top so that it lines up and it should snap, and then bring the bottom up again to snap to the base. Okay, so it's just that final piece, otherwise it'll have a hole. Yeah. So maybe I'll do the section box through there so you can see it all in the end. But okay, so I could leave the bottom out because that's where I'll put the lighting in. Right, so I'm going to go back into Plan, and so I'll find the extrusion, in fact, just so that it's not totally confusing. I'll do it in the 3D view, otherwise you won't see it. I'm just going to change the view there so I can see my extrusion underneath. You can see it right here. Okay, so again I'm just going to copy and paste, and then bring it down so that it's touching the ground. I think I've gone a bit too far there. And I might just bring the sides in just to get this done quickly so I can get onto lighting. Okay, so maybe I'd spend a bit more time getting that shape right, but oh yeah, they're lights, yeah. Okay, so then to make that look cleaner, so these are all separate pieces. Now I can use Join and choose each of these elements and make them blend into one. That's right, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so that's how you do rounded edges on things. So countertops are a common thing where you'll need rounded edges, and gutters, skirtings, cornices, all of those things follow the same principle. So it's really just thinking about the profile that defines the shape or defines the form, and the plane that that profile needs to be defined in before you go ahead and do the path or the axis, or even just set up the extrusion. Yep. So that's right, exactly. Yep. And sections are really good to work in. I'm just used to working in 3D views, but sections can be really good too. Yep. So I'll finish that model, and then finally putting lights in is fairly easy now. So if I go, actually I will do a section through there just so you can see exactly what it looks like. Okay, so I've got a section here that's already cutting through that area, so I'll just go and open that. So you can see there's my unit. I need to bring this bit down, and I'll bring the side in at the back as well. But I've got room there for my lighting. Okay, so there are linear lights in the library, so you can have a look at those. So if we go to lighting fixtures, and then so I forget these names. Oh yeah, in this, oh no, I think it must be in lighting. Yep, that's it, standalone linear. Yep, so that one's okay, but it's just got a bit too much around it. So that's why I'm opening it, so that I can clean it up a bit. So it's got all of the fitting for fluorescent light or something, and you might not want all of that. So you can clear a lot of these things, so I'm just deleting them. And then this is, let's see, that's material. Yeah, they didn't set up a lot of the actual glowing bit. So I'm going to make this the bulb essentially. And if we go to an elevation, so it's just like the other extrusions. This one's been drawn just with an extrusion, but drawn from the side. So I can go now to edit extrusion and get rid of that. And I'm going to draw a circle instead, and a fairly small one. And then, okay, so already in 3D that's much simpler. And then this light source is set up the right way, but it's going to the side. So if you look in the right view, you can see there it's oriented. Yeah, yeah, that's right. So you can, that's right. So you need to unlock these, and then use the rotate tool and bring it around, and then use the align tool and lock it again. Okay, so that's locked again and pointing down. And then I'll move this extrusion so that it's above. Okay, so I'll save this one for you as well. And right, so I'm just going to finally make that into a glowing material. And so when you select it, you'll see this one already has a parameter. So remember, to assign a material when it already has a parameter, you go to family types, and then you'll see the parameter field there. And that's not a very good name either, so I'm going to rename that and make it, sorry, what? Oh, that's family type, so rename, over here's all, sorry, so we can go light bulb, modify, sorry, there we are. Light bulb, material, and then I'll change it to a luminous material. So it's just got a default luminance. There we go. Okay, so I'll save that into the I'll put in lighting fixtures. I'll just put all the stuff I make in there just to remind myself. Yeah, I'll double check, but it should have. Yeah, that's why I used this one. Yep, so it should have. If it doesn't, I'll add one. So I'll just call it standalone bulb linear. And yeah, so we'll check that it does have that length parameter. It should. Ah, no, it doesn't. Okay, that's great. Oh, here we go. It's got length, so it just isn't showing up. It looks like it is there. Yeah, it's there. And so they've got these different preset lengths, but you can easily add your own in. Okay, so I'll load that in. And with the align tool, I can line it up exactly with the bench. That's pretty close. Yeah, yeah.
That's how easy it is.
Okay, so this one, it's roughly going to be 2400 long, so I'm going to go to edit type, duplicate and put in that new name, change the length here. That should be about right. Could be a bit longer, but that'll do, I think. And so then in my section, must be the other one. There we are, I can see then the height, and just nudge it down using the arrows. Okay, so I'll probably change my footrest completely, but just so you can see it, I'll do a quick render of that area. So it needs materials as well on the bar, but again, just so you can see. Of course, going to save it. Okay, so interior artificial only, just for testing at least. Okay, now, so there's a problem with the distribution. So, that's alright? Yeah, well, not quite where I wanted though. So, back to, now, okay, good trick here. That light, I've just selected using tab, and I'm going to go to edit family, and notice now, if I look in family types, it hasn't added it. It should have added my, my type. Anyhow, that's alright. Also, it's because I haven't closed it. So I'm going to close this file, and now do that again. So there's my light, edit family, and there it is. Okay, so the 2400 that I added in the project goes into the family file. So it's just one of those little tricks. And so let's check the distribution. So if I select that last source distribution, it's on linear. Yeah. So, and it's on down. So I'm going to try rectangular, yeah, and leave it on this one, and then just set it to a narrow rectangle. So, okay, so here what you can do is make the emit from rectangle there fairly narrow, so maybe 10 or something, and then the emit from rectangle length equal to length. So I can just type in their length, and that way it'll always follow the size. Yeah. Okay, so I'll save that again. Load, yes, load it back in. Standalone bulb linear. And it's doing it again. What's going on there? Okay, so yeah, this has always been an issue with mental array. So in 3ds Max, this is why I use 3ds Max, you can control these things a lot more. Try going for web. No, web you need. If you had an IES file, then that would definitely work. But I don't know if you've got any. So no, I don't want spot. That should be the right distribution. Okay, so what we can do there is just reduce that brightness, and so there I'm going to make it. I mean, it's fairly low anyway, but let's just make it 800 or something. And then do all of the work with the material. Okay, so I'm going to make this material let's say 7,500, something like that. So that's actually assigned, yes. It's annoying because with mental array in 3ds Max, rectangular distribution or linear, it does perfect distribution now, but it has been an issue for quite a while. With mental array, still doing it. Okay, it is. Yeah. Okay, so we should be able to do the rest of it in here. Oh, okay, of course. So this hasn't picked up the old, the new settings. So it's going to make this really dim, and then my glass white high luminance material already existed in the project, so it hasn't picked it, detected the changes I made in the family. But now it should. Okay, so you can start to see there the light coming down. So now I can just go and increase the brightness of the material and take the light itself down to almost nothing. Okay, so yeah, it's lucky mental array does image-based lighting. In other words, lighting with a material. So the material, if it's a glowing material, will emit light, which is yeah. No, it's a bit painful. Yeah. Yep. So there we go. Okay, so then as you improve the render quality, that will do even more. But it does nice lighting, so you can see it on the brass, that's working pretty well. And so with a different material as well, that would look quite different. So on the counter there, so I might have a white plastic. Whoop. And that should make a big difference as well. Okay, so then I can go and fine tune the lighting a bit more, but again, as the quality goes up, that will be better. So well, no, this one does as well. It's just that you can't tell the distribution up close with the other one because it's not up against the wall. But it's been an issue with mental ray in Revit for a long time because it's actually not full mental ray. They just don't give you all the options that you need to control certain things. But again, as the quality goes up, it will take care of a lot of that. So I might just do it on high, but I'll set it to region so it just renders that area. So it won't take as long. I think it's part of the reason that they've taken mental ray out, because it was never really perfect in Revit. Not sure, probably also is a licensing thing, but I think I told you so. In 2017 they don't have mental ray anymore in Revit. It's been replaced by the Autodesk ray tracer. And for years, I mean, even though mental ray works much better in 3ds Max, I've been using V-Ray for 10 years in 3ds Max just because things like this don't happen, really. It's much more consistent engine, even though it's maybe not quite as high-end in some ways. I think it's got a really good final result generally, and mental ray, when you get technical issues like this, is just tedious trying to yeah, it can be hours. I've spent days, literally, just trying to get rid of rendering artifacts, like along the edges of where you get two different materials connecting. It's always been an absolute pain. So going beyond this, once you get everything working and set up the way it's meant to be, you still can get technical issues that just are really difficult to resolve. Which is a shame, because the mental ray can give really good results, and it is still used for some high-end things, but like a lot of big corporate stuff, they just let things fall through the cracks and don't seem to notice. Yeah. Oh, of course, yeah, and a lot of the modelling tools in Revit, and especially the rendering tools, but even you'd be surprised how many of the modelling options have been ported over from 3ds Max. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay, sure, I'll have a look at it. Yep, should be able to sort that out pretty easily. So, okay, so you can see there, it's much smoother. I'll probably need to reduce the brightness even more, but if you just want it like a glow, that's a good way of doing it. And it does have lots of nice little extra benefits, like making this nearby object look much better. But again, that brightness is just a bit too much, and it does have a bit of spillover, unfortunately. actually, so what I'll do. Okay, I'm just going to make that plastic. Okay, so the plastic being glossy is probably pushing it a bit too far as well, and just try matte, and I'd make maybe the top glossy if I can, but if the bottom's matte it might be better as well. But yes, actually that will give you a lot of options, because if you want to do recessed lighting, you don't even need to put in a light source. You can just put in a solid and then give it that glowing material, and that'll do it. That glass illuminates material, and it will render with a glow. Not really, unless you're going to do a lot of them. If you're going to do a lot, then yeah, well, yeah. So then, yeah, it's difficult to do it with the material. So probably what you're better off doing then is making lots of small lights, and just copying a row of them, a string of them. And we've done that before to get that effect, and it works really well. But you need a lot of them. So every 20 centimetres, or maybe 50 centimetres at most. You just got to get them close enough together. Yeah. So it's a bit of trial and error, because it depends how far you're viewing it and things like that, and how bright the light is. But it works in the end. And also how close it is to the wall. That's the other thing. So if you get it a little bit away, it does more of a linear distribution. But honestly, I thought they'd fix that with the newer versions, but obviously not. Oh yeah, sure, I was muted, so nearly done. Yeah, so it's just spilling over, unfortunately, into the front, which is a shame. But with a bit of trial and error, you get that to go away from the front as well. Yeah, well, that's right. You can fix a lot of this up in Photoshop. So you can get the basic thing set up and then use that, and then just paint over this. So that would be something you could easily just clone stamp to clean it up. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.